All right, are you guys feeling ready? How would I know? Give me a wave. Yes, thank you, perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in Evan and Michael. All right, we've got Evan unmuted. Evan, are you there?
I am here.
Perfect. Let me find Michael. Oops. All right, Michael. There you are.
You should be unmuted now, right?
You're there.
Great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I need to go to my own view options, I think.
Right, so now everybody, you can see the gallery view, or you can choose the speaker view if you'd like. So your choice. Speaker view will let you see Michael up close and personal. Gallery view lets you see this whole community that's forming tonight.
Don't look too closely.
Exactly. Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have such a big crowd. This is certainly the most people that have ever attended a PGH photo event, and we're kind of thrilled. It's a funny silver lining that that being required to do virtual events means that we're not limited by location, and we have so many West Coast and East Coast and even international friends joining us that I think it's great. We're thrilled that Michael Hawley is here to talk with us tonight about his passion for collecting and his philosophy of collecting. You can read about Michael in the bio that is going to be up on the screen shortly, and certainly online at pghphotofair.com. So I thought that rather than enumerate his many accomplishments, I would just talk a little bit about how Michael and I crossed paths, which it's kind of funny because the world where Michael and I meet kind of isn't happening anymore, right? You know, I've been one brief time to Michael's house, and Michael's never been to Pittsburgh. Although if we'd had the speaker series for real, he would have. But really, we just kind of crossed paths at all of these art events, at art fairs and gallery openings and museum events, and this kind of nomadic art world that exists virtually now. And we just always saw each other. I mean, we would just regularly see each other in New York and Paris and the West Coast, and got to know each other that way. So it's funny how communities get built out of things that are not really home-based. But we've known each other for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years now, maybe
Right.
a little bit more, something like that. And we've always enjoyed talking, and we share a lot of similar positions about art and photography in the world. And so it's always a pleasure to see Michael. And so without further ado, I think I will hand over the virtual microphone to Michael, and we'll hear what he has prepared for us.
Great. Well, Evan, thanks. I mean, everybody should know that Evan is sort of the consummate host, and he always has these fantastic gatherings in Paris and in New York around APAD, and he and I have a lot of mutual friends, and so it's always great to see him. And I was so flattered that he asked me to come and speak today, and it's so good to see. I see a bunch of people on my screen, and a lot of PAC people and people from LA that I know, and I hope that the rest of the people here who I don't know will find this interesting, and because I'm just a big schlub. Anyway, so here, I'll just sort of plunge in. So I'm a collector. I've always collected sort of in my own way. Like everybody has these pre-prescribed ideas. Lots of people have pre-prescribed ideas of the way to collect. You should collect birds, or like my friend Willard, or hands, or trains, or German photographers. But I've always collected from the beginning just things that have moved me and that have made me question. And I collect things that remind me of times in my life. And this collection that I'm going to pull some pieces for you to see is, pulls together some of the threads of my experience. So a little more about me. it's all about me, but a little bit more. I grew up overseas. I grew up all over the world in different places. My dad was an international business guy, and so the collection has a lot of international photographs in it. And as far as I go, I'm this big and busy person. I have a lot of friends, but I also love being alone. I sort of treasure my solitude, and that's all in here. You'll see it in the collection. It's, you know, as I said, it's not thematic, but instead it's more of a personal extension of myself. And I think that there's a stillness to this collection. And the poet T.S. Eliot wrote about the still point of a turning world. And that is something that resonates with me and I think is evident in this collection. So here goes. I'm going to try to share the screen and we can get started. Let's see. Here we go. Hold, please. Okay, can you guys all see that? Did everybody see it? Hands up, thumbs up? Okay, great. So there's my big mug. All right, so we'll start here. So I moved to Los Angeles in the early 90s, and I came here to seek my fortune. So when I got here, it looked like this. It's like the palm trees sprouting out of the cement, the tail lights. So people might have heard the word dingbat. Like, this is a dingbat. It's a printer's mark that you see in the end of books, or what Archie called Edith, a dingbat. In Los Angeles, this is a dingbat. It's a horrible apartment building that I lived in when I moved to LA and had come to seek my fortune. And it's the kind of place that pancakes during an earthquake. This is a photo by Judy Fiskin of a dingbat. And this is what the inside looked like. This is a Stephen Shore picture, but my life very much looked like that when I moved to Los Angeles. And I was here to write the great American novel, be successful as a writer, and just things were not working out. Instead of the great American novel being finished, it was a novel-length manuscript on my bookshelf, and instead of an Emmy, I had like a tuna fish can on my shelf in my kitchen. So needless to say, things were not working out in the dingbat. So I went to visit Photo LA, which was at the time a big, and still exists in LA. And I went to it, and I found this. And this is a photograph by a photographer named Dave Heath, and he's American who spent most of his life in Canada. And in this life that I was having that wasn't working out, I bought this, as my grandmother would say, on the long finger, on a credit card. I couldn't afford it, but I had in this life, in that horrible environment, this one beautiful thing, this one sort of object of beauty. It's from a collection. I'm sorry, it's from a book called A Dialogue with Solitude. That's the book, and it was published in 1963 by Dave Heath, and it's an incredible photograph. He was a master printer. He was a student of W. Eugene Smith, who's actually a photo you can see behind me is a W. Eugene Smith photo. But he used techniques with potassium ferrocyanide as a chemical to remove the silver from the paper to emphasize little bits and pieces in this photograph, like the under the eyelid, the fingernails, the lips, and I just love it. And when I had it in the dingbat, I would say, you know, this is my burning house photo. If my house burned down, this is the one thing that I would run out with. There's that book again. So happily, things changed and the internet came along, and that kind of saved me, and I got a good job with the internet. And I had more money to spend on photographs. And this is another Dave Heath that I bought is when I could afford it. I started to develop relationships with gallerists. And that's something I really, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Something that I really recommend that young collectors or early collectors try to develop these relationships with the gallerists, because they can really help you, and they can point you in the right direction and show you things that you might not have found on your own. So in my experience, I find them to be mostly very, very kind and helpful, and I've developed some very, very close relationships. So this is a picture called Howard Crawford, Jr., Korea, 1954-55. And I bought it from my photo guru, Tom Gitterman, who's a New York gallerist. This thing. So one of the threads that I mentioned was that I studied, you know, that earlier on I mentioned like this collection pulls together these threads of my life. And one of them that I mentioned is, I didn't mention, but is I studied a lot of Renaissance art. And when I saw this photograph, it reminded me of something, of a Renaissance painting, of something religious. And this is a detail from Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. That's the detail of Christ in that picture. And here's the Dave Heath, and here's the Da Vinci. And it's just remarkable. And I absolutely love this picture. So auctions are a really good place for beginning collectors to find things. I found this at an auction. This is a Walker Evans piece. It's called Cuban Boy, and it was taken in 1933. Beware of the auctions for beginning auction people because they add 25% to the price that you think you're buying it for. But anyway, so this is by Walker Evans, and it has a few flaws. It has you can't see it in this, but it has a small bend in the corner here, and a little sort of scuffing on one of the other corners. But I just love the picture, and another one of my photo gurus, Michael Dawson, said, you know, these are pieces of paper. They're old. This is from 1933, and they're going to have slight damage, which made me think of diamonds and diamond dealers. And they talk about stones with flaws in them as having inclusions. And so I decided to think of it more like that. Instead of a flaw in my photograph, it's an inclusion. It includes evidence that it's lived a life. This photo is small. It's only 5.5 inches square, but you can't look away. I mean, the intensity of this kid's face, it's just gorgeous. So in about 2007, I became involved with the Photographic Arts Council at LACMA, at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, which was the support group for the photography department. And one of the members, and my very close friend, Maureen O'Sullivan, who probably everybody in this room knows, she got us VIP tickets. That's PAC LA now, but she got us VIP tickets to Paris, to Paris Photo. This is a 2018 catalog. And Paris Photo it completely blew me away. There were galleries from all over the world, places I would never find on my own, and artists that I would never have discovered. And this is the first thing I bought at Paris Photo. It's by Annie Lepala, who's a Finnish artist. She's young. She went to her grandmother's house and found old things that were lying around, like this eiderdown, and she wrapped herself in it and took a self-portrait. And for me, this is sort of a transition photograph between childhood and adulthood. She's wrapping this blanket tightly like a little girl would, but yet down here, you see her woman's knees, and I loved it. It's quite large, and it's this beautiful Renaissance red, again, harkening back to the studies of Renaissance art. The fair really exposed me to all kinds of photography, and I started looking more broadly and snooping around into contemporary work. Our very own Evan Mirpole alerted me to this. This is a piece by a German artist named Christiane Faeser. And I couldn't figure out what was going on with this photograph. She cuts the photograph, she folds the paper, she takes a picture of it. So some of these lines here, like this is a shadow, a real shadow of a oops, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. That's a real shadow of an elevated piece of folded paper. Some of the paper is cut and lifted off the background, and it's just incredible. And I bought it right away. I'd never seen anything like it. But as I was walking away, I was thinking, did I just buy a craft project that I just spend my money on? And flash forward last year, the Getty put it on the wall as part of an exhibition that Virginia Hecker had put together. So that was just so rewarding. Here's a Canadian artist named Rachel Bussières out of San Francisco. She solarizes things and buries them and does all these kind of things she won't reveal. This is another contemporary photographer, Dorothy Smith, who's French. I just love this photograph. And here's a chemogram by the really wonderful Mariah Robertson. If you ever met Mariah Robertson, she's just terrific. You'll really like her. But a chemogram, super simplified version. it's made by applying chemicals to light-sensitive paper. So it isn't a photograph like you traditionally know one, but it's photochemicals and photo paper and magic that Mariah does so well. So my foot was now in the contemporary world, but you know, as much as I get into contemporary, they pull me back in. Another year at Perry Photo, I went to visit my pal, I mentioned before, gallerist Tom Gitterman from New York, and I went to visit his booth, and we've become good friends over the years. And as always, his booth was one of my first stops when I go to Paris Photo. And he said to me, you know, I have something for you, he said, and he said, it's a low voice, and he said, he very furtively looked around. He pulled a box out from under the desk, and this was in it. This is a photograph by Ralph Eugene Meatyard. Strange name if you haven't heard it, but one of my favorite photographers, again, a square format photograph. It was taken in 1963. He was a photographer while everyone was taking sort of street photography, and he was taking these suburban scenes, but this is very unusual for him because most of the suburban scenes, if you're familiar with them, are people wearing Halloween masks and creepy doll heads and strange scenarios in rural America. And he was in Kentucky. He was an optometrist from Kentucky. I think he was an optometrist or an optician, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's usually an ordinary town with an ordinary town scene with a freaky twist. But this was unusual to me. And I couldn't take my eyes off it. I have a younger brother named Andy, and he's very intense and he's very direct. And I was always there daydreaming out the window. And for me, in this picture, there we were. There's Andy standing up, and there's me looking out the window. It was just us, and my heart sank at that moment. And I mean sank because I'd come all this way to Paris, and my budget was just blown in the first 5 minutes of the fair, and I may as well have just gone back to LA because I couldn't afford anything else because I had to buy this one. So my taste had widened toward contemporary, but you know, like with this photograph, the combination of the beauty of the image and the skill and mastery of this artist making this gorgeous piece, and it's flawless. It's a flawless piece, and his skill and just the emotion that it brought up to me gets me every time, and that's why I got this place. So this is a photograph by a Norwegian photographer named Torbjorn Roadland. And I consider him to be part of this sort of transition team of these great photographers who are building a bridge between contemporary art and contemporary galleries and photography. So photography going into contemporary art galleries, painting, sculpture, etc. I got this at an auction for Blind Spot magazine, which I loved. Blind Spot, RIP. I wish it were still around. Here's another note for beginning collectors that charity auctions like this and auctions to support photography things are really helpful. And you can sometimes find real treasures like this one. And this is, for me, is a completely disarming photo as it breaks all of the rules of what most of us have learned to be classic portrait photography. I mean, it's backlit, she's moving, her mouth is open. Her beauty is very unusual, but to me, it's sort of a perfect beauty. It's just beautiful. She's Modigliani, and she's Botticelli's Venus, and she's also Dad, whatever. You know, that looks like she's saying something like that. Let's see. But you know, Torbjorn Roadland is an interesting photographer. And most of his work is done in these kind of almost like sets that he made up in this weird, either early morning or late afternoon light, and you're not quite sure what's going on, but they're mainly people, and there's a story behind each one of them. And this one has very much a story too that you don't know and you can make up for yourself, which is one of the great things I like about photography. You make up stories to go along with things. I want to collect more of him. He's the kind of artist I really love. So as I mentioned, I lived all over the world. Each one of these X's is where I lived. This is a map of the world. The first place I ever lived was Hong Kong, and this is a photograph by Fan Ho, who was a Hong Kong artist who died a couple of years ago. This is looks at an alleyway in Hong Kong, and to me, you can see the air. You can see if anyone has ever been to Hong Kong, it's this thick air, and the smells are things you've never smelled before, and you know, the little cat walking across. And to me, it's just so evocative of a time in my life when my earliest memories actually were here. And this photograph, I lost my cursor. This photograph is by Michael Bodman, who's a Dutch photographer. And it's called Australia. And Australia is a place where I spent most of my teenage years. And he told me that I met him, which is another great joy, meeting the photographers. And he told me that this was a photograph of two Dutch children who were lying on this warm front stoop, looking at the stars in Australia, which were completely different. The southern stars are completely different from anything they were familiar with, and they were just looking up at it. Again, it's an evocative of a memory. Me and my sister lying on the ground, looking up in the air. It's kind of a great picture to me. I also spent many years in Latin America, and this is a photo taken in 1929 by a photographer named Martin Chambi, and he was so interesting. He had a photography studio, and he brought in, you know, the local town dignitaries and the school board and the band and the kids, but he also was very interested in the indigenous people who lived around where he lived. And so this is a photograph called El Gigante de Paruro, which means the Giant of Paruro. And this man is 7 feet tall, and he's an indigenous inhabitant of that part of Peru. And for me, this man, you can imagine, and this is 1929, his life as a giant in this world, and his beautiful face, and it's just so sad and perfect. Here's a picture from a book that shows Martin Chambi and the giant, El Gigante. But this picture is, you see his studio with the Italianate background, and he just is so out of place in his garb, that is his outfit that is made of pieced together pieces of material, and his rowana, his poncho, which is, I love this photograph. I can't take my eyes off it. So it's becoming a theme in my collection. I just end up staring at these pictures. Okay, so here, this photograph is by Graciela Iturbide, who's a Mexican, another Latin American photographer who I adore. And this is a Oaxacan Indian woman who, in this culture, it's a matrilineal culture. In her culture, there's a lot of women who work in jobs that we might, in the United States, might traditionally associate more with men. But she's a butcher, and see, it's a kind of a brutal picture with it. Her foot on the goat, you know, the blood on her skirt, and the fantastic knife between her teeth. It's amazing. And yet her t-shirt, I mean, her sweater here is like embroidery, and she's got a little necklace and her earrings, and then the knife clenched. I just love this photo. It's from the 70s. And this is also by Graciela. This is Graciela Iturbide. This is called Angelita. And I have a good story behind this one. I love this story. This photograph is something that I saw in a book. And I went to my friend Rose Shoshana, who's a brilliant gallerist in Santa Monica. And I said, you know, she represents Graciela. And I said, do you know this photograph? And she said, I don't know it, but I'm going to ask Graciela. And so Graciela said that she made it in the 70s, and no one wanted it, but she always loved it. So she printed it for me, and she signed it on the back. And flash forward about 6 months, I was at a party with Rose, the gallerist, who was with Graciela. And Graciela said to Rose, well, who bought the Angelita picture? Which is this woman, Angelita. She's a Syri Indian woman. And she said, who bought the Angelita picture? And Rose goes, oh, that big guy over there. And she pointed at me. And so Graciela, who is tiny, this is Graciela. She's tiny. She's maybe 5 feet tall. She comes over to me, and she doesn't know that I speak Spanish. And she nods her head to one side and beckons me to the bar and pulls out this gigantic sort of Costco bottle of Frida Kahlo tequila and poured 2 shots and said, salud, and made me drink the shot with her, which I, of course, she didn't really have to make me do it because I love tequila. But anyway, and then we became friends right there and started speaking Spanish. And then flash forward to Christmas, I get this book in the mail, her collected works. And inside it says, por Miguel, for Michael, con cariño, which means with affection, Graciela. And we've been friends ever since. And I see her when she comes to Los Angeles. So looking at photos, you know, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, he says, like, putting 10,000 hours into something will make you an expert on it. I do not call myself an expert, but I certainly have put in 10,000 hours of staring at photos. And as I mentioned, I have a love for art history, and my love for painting and photography call out to each other here. This is Weston's Nude in a Doorway, I think it's 1938. But to me, this is Matisse. Look at that. Look at that. And it echoes to a photo that I love in my collection is also a Latin American photographer, Manuel Alvarez Bravo. And this is called Espejo Negro, which means black mirror in Spanish. And it's taken in 1947. And this image, along with the Keras and the doorway image, bring up something that really appeals to me in photography more and more each year, is the geometry of the image, the places that the arms go, the circle of the light. And this one, like the photograph I showed you from Van Ho in Hong Kong, remember that picture of the woman in the alleyway with the cat? With this photograph, it evokes emotion and evokes it has this sort of a sensory evocation, like who in this room can't feel the sun on their face when they look at her image? Just like, you can feel that sun. And this is a photo by Dorothy Lang. It's called Defended Alameda Courthouse, 1955. And people who, I'm sure this is a very learned group, I'm sure, but Dorothy Lang her most famous photograph is this one, which was called Migrant Mother, from her FSA project, where during the Depression she pictured of farm workers and people who were in the Dust Bowl. Anyway, like this photo, as soon as you look at it, this one, you know where you are. You're in a courthouse. Something has happened with this guy. But as I mentioned before, like the geometry of it really, really appealed to me. The curve of his back, the round of the chair, his fingers, and the chair rails. Look, they're echoed over here. The pencils on his tie. This is a photograph that I have not had very long, but I look at it every single day and I love it. Let's see. So my collection is filled with parts of my life that are really, really the most important to me. So there's love, and there's love in my collection. Let me just see. Oh, wait, I went too far. I have one more thing to say before I go on to talking about love. Never too soon to talk about love. This is one that I wanted to definitely include. And this is by Roy de Carava. And again, here we're talking geometry. Look at his arms. Look at this is two men dancing in a dance hall in 110th Street in Harlem, taken in 1954. And like most of de Carava's work, I treasure this photograph. It's very dark and you have to really look to see what's happening in the photograph. And for me, when I looked at this, again, the art history popped out, and look at this Matisse of Icarus. Look at the cutouts of his arms. Look at the man in this picture, and look at Icarus again. I don't know, it's just, these threads keep pulling each time. So let's see if I can go to the next one. Okay. So yeah, I started to talk about love. So this is Bert Hardy. And in my collection, there's a lot. I have these themes that are in my life, like the things that are most important to me. And this is taken right after the Second World War in London, in the Elephant and Castle neighborhood of London, which is sort of the Cockney neighborhood. And I just think, you can see they're totally in love. And I love also, again, here's the geometry of the leg and the curve from here all the way down to his leg. But look at her face, and he's just told a joke or something. I love this photograph. And here's another one. This is one of my all-time favorite photographs. It's Fulvia Reuter, who is an Italian photographer. And everything he does is fantastic. I think he passed away a few years ago, but this is another, I'm not a religious person, but I mentioned that religious photo with the Dave Heath and the Da Vinci, the cutout, the Da Vinci segment. This also seems religious to me. It seems this couple, like she's pregnant, their shadows are joined on the ground, his big hand, the field behind them, the small child in his carrying pouch here. I smile every time I see this photograph, and I see it a lot every day. And in my life, there's joy. I have a lot of joy. I'm really fortunate, not only to be surrounded by these photographs every single day, but the people that I have in my life, and I'm just extremely lucky. And you can find joy in the collection. If you look, I'm only showing you a few pictures today, but it's much bigger, and you can find it all over the place. And this is an artist named Sirka Lisa Kontonen, and she's I believe originally Norwegian or Finnish. I can't remember. I think she's Finnish, right? Evan, I think, yeah, she's from Finland, and she has lived for most of her adult life in northern England near Newcastle, and she's part of a group that was called the Amber Collective, and that group had many photographers. You might have heard of Graham Smith, Chris Killip, and this is a very working class part of England, and it's difficult. And these pictures were taken in the 70s and 80s, and Sirka didn't take pictures of the smoky alleyways and the men coming out of pubs and things like that, and the sadness. She took pictures of these working women in this area, and to me, this is my most favorite picture of hers, because she captures something here. These women are doing just what they shouldn't be doing, falling back into the ways, and they're fully clothed, but they're so happy. And I got it from a joy in my life, who is the gallerist Parker Stevenson. And she has sort of championed this photographer and brought her forward to America, and she has such a deep well of wonderful photographs, and this is one of my favorites. Also in this life, there's adventure. This is Mike Brody. I have lots of adventure in my life, and this appealed to me because it's these young people who were riding the rails across the United States. And these are actually two young women, and they were on these trains, and they were like, not just the women, there were a lot of young people, and they were all traveling together, and sort of sleeping out, and they had no money, and they ate cans of beans, and this one with the endless America stretching out into the background and then looking forward. I just think this is a gorgeous picture. And if you look up close on this young woman's hand, you can't really see it in this picture, but there's a tattoo across her fingers, and it says F-R-E-E, free, right across her fingers. I love it. Let's see, what's next? So another thing, and a really important thing in my life, is hope. Hope for the future. Hope when I was living in that dingbat. Hope that things would change, which they did. And hope that we'll all be in a better place. I mean, that really applies right now with our lives going on in this pandemic. But just hope in general is such a deep part of who I am. This is Emmett Gowan's photo of his wife, Edith. It's called Edith, Chincoteague, Virginia, 1967. It's another one of my favorites, and it's the first picture you see when you come into my house. As I think it's a wonderful introduction to the collection, because here we are behind the photographer, behind the beautiful woman, looking at the future or the past or whatever she's looking at. But the removal is just perfect for me. The river flowing away. So I and this collection have come a long way since this beginning photograph. And I live now in a house with a view on a hill. I have more than one object of beauty. And if a theme has emerged, maybe it's that the collection reflects the way that I live my life with love and with joy and with adventure. And with lots of memory, because memory of the past informs us, and it's, as always, driven by an irrepressible hope for the future. So in 2007, Griffith Park, which is up the street from my house, caught fire. And it's like 3 blocks from my house. And it was just a really big fire. And soon the firemen were knocking at my door and saying I had to leave because it was coming down the hill. And so I took this, and I took this, and I took one other thing, and it was this. That's what I took. The happy ending is my house did not burn down. Haha, great. It didn't burn down. And LA, I mean, so many people's lives just are dominated by these terrible fires. But I was super fortunate that the LA Fire Department was able to put it out, and I didn't have to rescue my collection or anything. But I thought about that. I thought about that. You know, I took the seed of my collection that it's still my favorite photograph, but it's become sort of a part of who I am. And I realized that while I was putting together this presentation that yeah, I made this collection, but in so many ways this collection made me who I am today. That's what I have to say today. And now I'm going to go back to stop sharing the screen. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for coming. There you go.
Yes, thank you, Michael. That was fabulous. I'm just gonna there we go. That's better. Now I feel like I'm just talking to you. Thank you. That's a wonderful little, if it's not too trite of a term, snapshot of your collection. Thank you for sharing. I know that one of the ways that we first intersected, and I think one of the threads of your talk is connection, right? And community. And I was thrilled to hear you mention that you have a good relationship with a number of galleries that we have in PGH Photo that are kind of foundational galleries, like Tom and Parker, who have always come to PGH Photo. And it's important for us too, the kinds of qualities that you're talking about, because there are gallerists out there like that. I think that for people who haven't really dipped their toe in the water of working with a gallery, there can be kind of an intimidating moment. But right, as you say, it's important to find the ones that will, you know, lead you on the flower-strewn path.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And for me, you know, it's in more than a dozen cases I've made friends with these gallerists, and they help you. I mean, I was on a panel once with a gallerist who a lot of people are intimidated, like you say, and I was throwing her softball questions. I won't mention who it is, but because I love it when gallerists, when you walk in, they'll say, well, what are you interested in? What kind of things have you thought about collecting? Do you know about this artist? I'll tell you about this artist. I love that kind of thing. And this one gallerist was saying, don't even come in unless you know what you're looking at and have $5,000 to spend. I was like, no, that's not what I want. That's when I would turn and leave and never come back, right? But you know, for example, like Tom, I brought up Tom, and early on, Tom kind of saw into me and saw what I like to collect, and would, if I wanted to buy something, he would say, no, that's no good. You don't want to get that one. And it's like, it's conditions bad or whatever. He would give me the right reasons. And he would say, well, what about this? Or I'm going to keep an eye out. And he would call me 6 months later and say, I found something that I think you'll really love. So that kind of forthrightness and honesty to me is just, you know, worth $1 million.
I think that it's so important. And it circles back to something that you do, which you mentioned briefly, but I hope you'll talk about it more, which is Photographic Arts Council, because that is creating community, right? It is a way to establish these relationships, you know, from the top down, from the novice person just interested in the medium to a senior curator at the Getty. 100%.
You know, as I mentioned briefly, I was originally involved with the Photographic Arts Council with Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And it was the support group for the photography department. And then in about 2013, they got rid of all the Photographs Council, which I thought was very short-sighted. But we had a very strong board, and some of them are here today. And we all got along really well, and we had made a lot of money for the museum. We'd done different limited editions with artists and so forth. And we'd essentially been giving a lot of money, but I won't talk about that anymore. We separated from them, and we just decided to go off on our own. And there's a great person here somewhere, Carol Vernon, who was on our board, who's just like this treasure, and I love her. And she navigated our way to nonprofit status, and that was 7 years ago. And you know, we have about 250 members, and we've done about 50 events a year, which is remarkable. And an event is not a party. An event is just going to a gallery, getting a walkthrough by an artist, or going to a museum and getting a walkthrough from the curator, or visiting a studio, or going on a trip. We've gone to Japan and to New York and to Chicago, and we also go to Perry Photo. About 40 or 50 people each year go to Perry Photo from PAC. So it's been a remarkable thing, because it's, it includes people with museum quality collections to people who are like, I'm interested in photography. What is that? How can I learn more? And I personally have learned an enormous amount from PAC LA. That's what we call it now, PAC LA, P-A-C-L-A. And the website is paclosangeles.com if anybody's interested in looking at it, paclosangeles.com. But I love it. The board that I work with, it's a working board, it's transitioning, but we work really hard, and everybody's very dedicated, and it's just about the love of photography, and that's it. Yeah. And I also work with the Getty too, which is I'm the head of the Getty Photographs Council. So it's my diabolical plan to take over every nonprofit thing in Los Angeles. but that's just a coincidence.
When we were preparing for this talk, Michael, you made what I thought was a great point, that there's really nothing geographically specific about what you're doing, and that it's a, in quotes, stealable idea.
Yes.
I know that.
I say franchisable. Franchisable,
perfect. I know that I was introduced to photography, not in such an organized way, but I was welcomed in by kind of a community that took me under their wing and taught me a lot, and variety of artists and curators and people that just were, invested in me learning more.
Right.
And maybe, a lesson we can take from our wonderful attendance today is that these things actually don't need to be geographically specific anymore, right?
No, not at all. And the variety of programming, and email me and I can talk to you about it. Or for the people on the program today, is we do all kinds of things, and especially now with this situation, we've moved a lot of our stuff online, and we've had lectures. We've had these kind of there's one last week by Pablo Lopez Luz, who's a Mexican photographer, and before that we had Doug McCullough, who's a curator at the Riverside Museum, and talking about fire in Los Angeles, and that was really exciting. He showed us amazing thing that he's done on that amazing show. But I think the programming options are endless, and people want to learn, and then the artists also want to talk about work. So I think it's a wonderful environment.
I see we're starting to get towards the end, and we do have a number of questions. So I think I'm going to try to pick some questions that I can see from my feed here, and I'll start with one of the most recent. Is that I need to read the. Charlotte has asked for you to talk about the photograph which is behind you.
Oh, yes. Maybe I'll pull it off the wall and put it closer to the camera. This photograph, I don't know, so there's a window there, so you can't really, let's see if I can not get it. I don't know if
a lot of reflection.
Can you see that a little better?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's good.
Photograph by W. Eugene Smith. And it's called Maud Callan. It's this woman, Maud Callan. She was a nurse midwife in South Carolina, and she'd come to visit the woman in the background of the picture, and because the woman was pregnant or something, and then the man in the front in the wheelchair, she had given some pain medication to him years earlier, and he was so grateful to her, he broke down and started crying. And so the picture seems like it's a sad picture, but it's really, he was just grateful to her. And the thing about this picture that I love so much is that I got it from Howard Greenberg and from Karen Marks there. And this is an object this is the photograph that was actually in Life magazine. It was a part of a Life magazine photo essay in the 50s. But this is the actual piece that was in it, and on the back of it, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there's a photocopy of what is actually on the photo, but it's like returned to Bob's desk, and stamps from various things. So it's more than just photograph. It's an object in and of itself, which kind of weirdly fits in with, like, we were talking about Christiane Faeser, who was the German photographer, and she calls her pieces photo objects. So that was the red one with the cut paper. And so this is sort of a photo object in and of itself, which I love. And I have it in my office there or there, every day I see it.
I think I can answer the question of who did the Griffith Park burning picture. That's your photo, right?
No, that was just a newspaper photo.
Oh, okay.
It was just to illustrate.
Cynthia asks, how do you display, or do you display your collection?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I meant to mention is that, one of the things, as I said, I'm not a collector who collects thematically or collects to sell his collection. Most of the things I own are on my walls. I love looking at them. I don't buy anything unless I want to live with it. And
Did you not have the infamous storage locker somewhere that's filled with work?
No, but I have like the behind the couch thing with the photos leaning, but that's only because I haven't taken the time to find the right place to hang it. And I have this is a very funny thing. In my house, you walk in and there's this stairwell, and I like, I was saying that I like this stillness, so I have nothing on the stairwell wall. It's a big empty wall, and every gallerist who comes to visit me, I see them looking up the wall. they're like, oh my God, I'll look at all that blank space. And so it's what gallerists don't like. They like to see the opportunity in that. But I still have space to hang.
And we have a question of how do you make decisions about framing?
I work with one framer. His name is Adrian Rivas, and he has a shop here in LA called Form Follows. And he is just great. He's an artist. He's part of the Chicano art movement in Los Angeles, and his skill is just extraordinary. I mean, he doesn't use too many colors or weird things. He can look at a photograph and say, I'm using this matte, and it's not white, and it's not cream, and it's this color, and it's perfect for this particular photograph. And his work is just really, really thorough and beautiful. And it's expensive, but it's worth it. I mean, the frames are gorgeous. And recently I've been framing a lot of like dark grays, and actually it comes from Tom Gitterman, my pal, who sold me a photograph once and framed it in gray. And I said, that is awesome. It's like this dark kind of charcoal color.
I've used a lot of that kind of palette too. When I think about framing for myself, I always think about, I think it was in like Esquire magazine, there was a comment that said, if somebody walks up to you and says, nice tie, you've chosen the wrong tie. If somebody walks up to you and says, you look great, you picked the right tie. And I feel that way about framing too. If somebody says, what a great frame, it's not the right frame.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you really wanted to highlight the picture,
right,
and kind of disappear in kind of elegant shadow.
Yes.
And so I do everything I can to just make the idea of framing invisible.
Right. Yeah.
Do we have more questions? I don't think we do. Casey, what do you think? Are we kind of at time, or any last minute?
A couple I'll throw out. We probably have about 2 other questions I'm just going to add in.
Yeah, please.
Andrea asks, are there a couple of galleries you would recommend for a novice besides Parker Stevenson?
In New York, are they writing from New York or from, depending where they are?
Unclear.
Unclear where they are. Well, here in Los Angeles, I mentioned Rose Shoshana, who has a gallery, and almost every gallerist has work that is at a certain price point. And if you go in and you say, I'm new to collecting, they're not going to try to sell you some crummy photo or whatever. They're going to find something that's by a photographer who has pieces at a lower price point if you're just starting out. And if they start pulling out $40,000 photos, you have to leave. I mean, it's you trust your instincts, just like collecting. You trust your instincts with the images, and like we're talking about that Christiane Faeser piece, the red piece with the sticks. I was looking at that and I was thinking, it was a long time ago that I bought that. And I was thinking, I don't know. I don't want to spend that much money. But my gut was saying, yes, this is so interesting. I've never seen anything like it. And then as I said just earlier, the Getty borrowed it for her show because it was interesting about cut paper. And she's now represented by several big galleries. But as a new collector, I would go to visit Tom for sure. I would go to visit Howard Greenberg if you like the photographer, the mid-century, mid-20th century photography. These gallerists like Howard and like Tom, like Parker, they just have this, they didn't just spring out of the sky. They learned from each other and grew and almost went to like photography selling school. And they, I don't know, they're honest and they're smart as anything. And so that's what you gotta trust your instincts in any gallery you walk into and talk to the people running it and see if you feel that you get them. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I've been working on instinct for a long time.
I would maybe approach it a little bit from a different angle, which is, I think it starts with one's own taste and just looking.
Right.
And the, and so, Tom is a great gallerist, but maybe he doesn't show anything that speaks to you. So, right. If you, when we're all allowed to, actually be in public spaces again, or you can start online now, see what speaks to you and then find places that show work that speaks to you and then go to those places and ask questions. And if the questions get answered generously and intelligently, right. You're probably onto something. And if the questions get answered dismissively or shortly, or as Michael says, trying to upsell you, then it's probably not a good place to start. But I think if you're already interested and you're asking questions and you're rewarded with a generous response, you're probably on a good path.
And also, one thing that I kind of mentioned briefly was that there are these charity auctions that come up with photography in them a lot. And often photographers will have given something beautiful and it'll be a fraction of the price that, like that Torbjorn Roadland piece, I couldn't afford that today. And I got it for a fraction of what it was actually should have, thanks to the brilliant Leslie Rubinoff who pointed me in that direction. But so, you just got to trust yourself, and you just got to look for the bargains too. Sorry, that's not very.
Here's a question that I have asked myself many times. I love this question. If money were no object, is there an aspirational dream piece you'd like to have? Is there the thing that if you could write any check that, yeah, I'd get that?
Yeah, actually, there is one, and it's a piece by Roy de Carava. He was the one who took the picture of the dancing guys in the dance hall in Harlem, and it's a singer. I think he's a singer, and he's African American guy, and he's completely sweating, and it's just it's up close picture about this close, and it's absolutely beautiful. But that's a really hard question because it changes all the time. And I have my eye on so many different things. But I would really like to go deeper in Roy de Carava's work because he's one of my favorite photographers. That's probably a better answer.
And that kind of touches on a thing that a lot of collectors talk about, of whether to just continue to get one piece from one and another piece from another versus going deeply into one. Is that something that you've thought about?
Right. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I have Dave Heath, the picture, the original picture, my burning house photo of the kid with her hand on the head. I have, and the other one of Howard Crawford in the doorway, the one that looks like the Renaissance painting. And I have another one, which I didn't put in the thing. So I have 3 by Dave Heath, and I have several by Graciela Iturbide, who was the woman I talked about with the tequila story. So I've gone deep in a few, or not deep, I've gone more than one photograph with about 3 or 4 photographers. I don't want to become like the De Carava guy or the Iturbide guy, because so much of it appeals to me that I want to see on my walls and I'm not like trying to accumulate a collection that I can sell at one point. I'm accumulating a collection that I want to look at. So, yeah.
Well, That's a lovely place, I think, to sum up.
Right.
To as an aspirational idea, let's all have collections that we want to look at. That's
It's very simple.
that's a sweet place to be.
Right.
Michael, thank you so much. This was a lovely talk. Thank you for inaugurating our Zoom speaker, and thanks for sharing so much of yourself and the work you love.
Well, thanks to everybody for coming. I mean, spending an hour just listening to me. I'm really grateful to you, and I'm flattered. I'm flattered, as I said again, that Evan invited me, and thanks to Casey, who's organized the whole thing so beautifully. And good luck with the rest of your series that are coming up this summer, right? You have several more coming.
Yeah, we have a few more. And
right.
And perhaps if we can get our act together to have our own PAC, Pittsburgh Arts Council, or PPAC, Pittsburgh Photographic Arts Council.
Yes.
We'll make an LA trip when we're allowed on airplanes again.
I would totally help you with that. And if anybody's interested in any of these photographers, Casey can put you in touch with me. And if you want to talk about PAC or join PAC, you can go to paclosangeles.com. But anyway, thank you. It was great. I was nervous, but it worked. That's good.
Fantastic. Yeah, everybody's clapping. We will put this recording up on the website so you guys can go back and revisit the photos.
Okay.
And if you're okay with it, we have a bunch of other questions. Maybe we can just send them to you and we can post your answers. So
absolutely.
We can get
absolutely. Just do that. I'll answer them all.
That'd be great. Okay.
Okay.
Before we go, we have to thank the William T. Hillman Foundation for making this possible. We really appreciate their support in all of this. And we really appreciate your support. So thank you all for coming out tonight, for kicking off our season in this great way and being such a wonderful photography community tonight.